Unit 4 Social Construction of Reality. Contents 4.1 Introduction, 4.2 Construction of Reality, 4.3 Phenomena of Social Reality, 4.4 Everyday Social Reality, 4.5 Language and Social Reality, 4.6 The Objective Reality of Society, 4.7 Legitimation and Social Reality, 4.8 Socialization and Legitimation, 4.9 Social Reality and the Symbolic Universe, 4.10 Maintaining Social Reality and Language, 4.11 Conclusion, and 4.12 Further Reading. Learning objectives. Once you have studied this unit, you should be able to define reality and social construction, describe construction of reality, indicate the relation between language, legitimation, socialization and reality, describe social reality and the symbolic universe. Session 4.1 Introduction. In this lesson, we are going to try and understand what exactly is meant by the social construction of reality. What do we mean by these words? Unless we understand each of these interrelated concepts, it would be difficult to proceed with our presentation of this most important aspect of social reality. Social reality indicates quite clearly that what we are referring to is in fact basically the capacity of society to develop different ways of looking at the constituents of the visible aspects of reality. Thus, in fact, as we will see that there are many societies and many cultures, but what is common among them is that social reality tries to perpetuate itself through the younger generation. But this does not usually succeed, and the social reality of each generation has several points of departure from the preceding generation. What is being said is that members of any society live by certain beliefs and principles, but these were not always there, and there have been significant shifts in each generation's point of view and perspectives. The points of importance is discussing the social construction of reality is that in most societies, the version of reality is not a single monolithic construct, but rather consists of several layers of meaning and existence. That is to say that there are many social constructions of reality which differ from category to category. So we must point out that while the method of social construction of reality remains similar in most societies, it is also very clear that there are multiple synchronic realities, that is, many versions of cultures and reality are available, especially in plural societies where these realities then intermesh and interact and influence each other in various ways. Thus, it is clear that reality is constructed in a specific way, but this does not mean that all versions of reality are the same. There is often much difference in their expression. Societies which creates reality, as we will see, provides many different points of ingress and is responsible for creating a socially intermeshed reality. What we are saying then is that there are plural, indeed multiple reality systems available for us to observe in our daily life, which is reality, the very root of any social constructions, and sustains the same even though periods of lowness and disruptions. Once we have read and understood the points made above, it should be clear that what we are discussing concerns the security and integrated way in which society perpetuates its attitudes and beliefs. It is also clear that each generation brings with a whole lot of perpetual explanations and a minimum acceptable standard of living so that it can lead to a meaningful existence. So it has to be noticed that society as a whole contains and keeps in balance that entire social process from cradle to the tomb. 4.2 Construction of reality. Now it would be natural to ask how is all these constructions of multiple and synchronic realities are achieved. What are the ways and the mechanism in which we as members together create a perpetual of the world progress? Surprisingly, social realities are created as soon as the new member of society are ready. A particular imprinting is begun to be ingrained in them. Among the important areas of life include the economic, political, psychological, and so on, and each of them is put together by training the new generation to act and behave in such a particular manner which they deem to be fit and worthy of them. The social fabric of any society is fragile construct which has to be constantly renewed through rituals and sustained interactions. Thus, reality itself is fragile, so that any disturbing or conflictual situations lead to a breakdown of order and mayhem rules. After such social breakdowns which comes occur in interaction in times of war with another nations or even chronic lawlessness, it takes much time to recover from the suburban. It takes much time to recover from such breakdowns of reality, and the time they take to repair the social fabric may last many years. Or even make a lifetime impact on some of the members. Thus, as we introduce the lesson, we have to point out that culture is many facet and the construction of reality through similar in many societies does not in fact differ from individuals to individual and from nation to nation. There is doubt that in the mind of the young and impressionable that has to develop certain capacity to be bounded, say by religious or economic status. Thus, there is different lifestyles created by different castes and classes which have a full-blown ideology and interaction in everyday life. These are not mere ways of looking at things out of curiosity. Rather, it is a crucial situation where the constructed reality has to be continuously fed and bolstered, so to speak, into the social system of system or systems. As such, when we discussed how social reality is constructed, then it becomes very clear to us that in order to perpetuate itself, societies takes recourse to both socialization and education and continues to control the individuals to some extent and even bring within him a sense of responsibility to further perpetuate his reality. We are going to explain in this lesson how social process constructs reality and thereby going further to establish that very pattern of culture and ideology which they thus in such a delicate and precise. So what we are reading is that we are going to explain in this lesson how social process constructs reality and thereby goes further to establish that very pattern of culture and ideology which they themselves are taught and learn to make the appropriate judgment and decisions within that very framework. Thus, in such a delicate and precise operation, it becomes obvious that not all members would be able to fit in fully into the social fabric, and these are deviant individuals, and society attempts through various other therapies to bring the deviant backs into the center of the mainstream of society. We have pointed out in various ways that our reality and experience are all constructed by human beings in communities, large groups, nation states, and at times by much larger concerns than the nation state itself. The task of the sociology of college is to indicate how precisely these constructions of social reality were evolved by human beings and groups of community of human beings. Thus, the interrelationship between the knowledge and the social context in which it has evolved is an important ingredient in understanding how society is able to create and recreate itself over the ages. According to some social scientists, it is believed that the societal context was the basis of the existence of ideas but not the precise ideas themselves, and therefore gave the individual some critical degree of voluntary actions and freedom of action. On the other hand, there are other social scientists who believe that human thought per se is never safe from ideology and the intellectual climate prevailing in the environment as a whole. It is thus clear that, as the social scientists have pointed out, that the acquisition of knowledge is accretional, accretional, and it gathers relatively slow, and only when sufficient aspects of the knowledge sought are examined does the view of any reality become focused and fear. Thus, knowledge is accumulated over thus the knowledge is accumulated over time, and it is not possible for it to be given full blown to the new members, and existing members are continuously taking fresh inputs through medias, instructions, institutions, family and work environment, and so on, to keep them abreast of the events that are happening in society as possible. 4.3 Phenomena of social reality. Berger, Luckman feel that to study the phenomena of social reality implies that we use everyday common sense reality as a point of departure. This is what knowledge ultimately comprises: the interaction and the participation in social life and process. Thus, common sense ideas are the most important ingress into understanding the sociology and phenomena of individuals, groups, and society. Thus, it is clear that the society has at the very least two sides to its existence and ontology. One is subjective and the other is objective. Together, these facts give rise to the understanding that while there is a group life for an individual, there is in fact an objective reality, rules and regulations which have to be adhered to unless the individual or group wants to be ostracized. Thus, first of all, the reality of social life is sui generis, that exists over, above, and beyond any single individual. Thus, Berger interested, as are we, in finding out how humans produce and perpetuate social life in all its manifold facets and aspects. Thus, by attempting to understand social reality, we are really asking how it was constructed, because this is what will give us the cues to proceed further with our line of inquiry. 4.4 Everyday social reality. Berger, Luckman and point out that everyday life and its basics is such that it is best apprehended by the method of phenomenological analysis, which happen to be a descriptive method. Thus, we observe that consciousness has the basic property of existence in several dimensions and several types of reality. Thus, human beings are aware to a greater or lesser extent that the social world comprises of many or multiple realities in everyday life. These multiple realities are themselves well ordered and more or less fully developed and quite capable of influencing each other. Thus, phenomena are such that a particular pattern can be discerned by a human being, and these social facts are imposed upon them. In other words, a new entrant into a society sooner or later finds that he or she has a particular social order which is imposed upon him or her. Thus, we find that common sense knowledge is what human beings are share intersubjectivity through interaction with other human beings. This becomes very clear in the structure of routine that human beings follow in the course of their life, in the course of their daily life. Pursuing an inquiry into common sense knowledge and its social context is relatively simple, but Berger and Luckman point out that the difficulty exists in the comprehension and translation of those areas which are not classifiable as common sense knowledge but are in fact non everyday reality. Box 4.1, Indexication constructions. Indexical constructions. The Indian social world is a set of indexicalities which are taken from granted, which are taken for granted. They are rarely called into question, and when they are, the questioning stays at a superficial level, accepting fairly quick and easy classifications instead of pursuing the search for objectivity to its end, for there is no end. The search for objectivity in definable reality is a bottomless pit. That is taken from the Randall Collins 1988 Theoretical Sociology, Orlando Harcourt, page number 77. To understand the social construction of reality, we have to be aware of the time structure of daily life, since this sheds an important insight on the overall social order. As Berger and Luckman pointed out that the temporally reflects and is a basic property of consciousness itself. Again, we find that the temporal structure of daily life is an extremely complicated matter. This is because consciousness exists and interacts at many different levels, and at all these different levels of reality have to be seen as interrelated and arranged in a specific pattern. Thus, the temporal structure existing in society indicates clearly defines the situation for members of the particular society they belong to. Let us consider the question of daily interaction between human beings in any particular society. In these interactions, it is the direct or face-to-face situation which defines much of the structure of reality in a everyday life. This is because when there is face-to-face interaction, the self and the other, an intersubjective understanding by each of the other. Self-reflection is also an outcome of the behavior with others, as it makes us conscious of what we are and stand for in society. Since it creates or even gives us our attitudes and subsequently our behavior, which in turn is the basics of human social reality or realities. It may be pointed out, however, that everyday reality itself has many components, and this itself could generate specific situations and attitudes. It is therefore clear on observation that while there are basic similarity in social reality, there are also areas that create rules of their own and impose them on the members of a given reality. This reality began again, although it is so clearly present in social situation, is in fact influenced and bounded by the rules of social reality. 4.5, Language and social reality. Another area where social reality is present is that of the area of language. All languages have a particular grammar and syntax. and is the most significant and important science system of all societies. It helps to create a fund of knowledge which is continuously going expansion and contraction as a different words and ideas which enter into the overall fund of knowledge and ideas. And there are some aspects of knowledge and understanding which fall out of the overall system of ideas and knowledge. Thus, for example, the English language has compiled vast dictionaries which are revised and edited and updated, and in these social procedures many new words and concepts enter into the language. There are also words and ideas that become defunct and are removed from the dictionary and language. So we can say that the language as a social reality accumulates knowledge and transmit it to other members of the human system, which in turn create a socially ordered environment. It may be pointed out here that the language itself is a highly complex aspect of social reality, and research into how a human being leans and adapts to the social order of reality. Thus, it is pointed out that language is symbolic and therefore capable of apprehending social reality. Therefore, it is a social fact which exercises control or restraint over human members and yet remains an externalization and outside the individual. This is because the ontological reality of language is such that it is the backbone of social order and it is main artery of communication. Reflections and actions. 4.1. Is society socially constructed, or is it a divine religiously raised structure? Reflect and comment. So you can write it down. We can therefore say that language is a vast respiratory repertory of knowledge, reason, morality, politics, and social attitudes. It can then be added that if the language is changed, the particular ideological learning or of a linguistic framework would also be deeply affected. Thus, social reality can be apprehended by a study of language and its application to varying situations within the social context. Related to this is the idea that not only does language provide us an ingress into the overall structure of the society, it is basic to human progress, and the shift in the prominent features of social reality form a basic component of the history of theories and ideas so far as sociology and the sociology of knowledge is concerned. 4.6. The objective reality of society. Let us now consider the objective reality of society. By objective reality, we mean that society exercises control over the individual and is beyond the control of any single individual. Let us see how this happens in society with a specific focus on institutions. How does an institution direct and control the behavior of its members? And how it is that while individuals are born, live and die, institutions can exist indefinitely in time. This is why we are choosing this area for the exemplification of the social reality which exists and how it continues to exist. Let us look at the phenomena of institutionalization, a procedure that creates a space and certain goals and aims that would be reached through various rules that define institutional behavior. It has been pointed out that every institution exists in both a physical, environmental, and as a social environment. The fact is that both these are given and cannot be altered at will. In fact, it is in his overall social and physical environment that makes a man a human being. It is this interaction with the physical and social environment that creates the existence of all human activity. This is because no human activity can be begun or completed without the due impact of the overall or total environment. Now the question arises regarding how institutions themselves begin, continue and establish themselves. In short, we are now asking the origin of human institutions. It may be pointed out that the institutions arise when there is the reciprocal typifications of the habitualized behavior that make for strictly patterned behavior, which should not go out of the limits of the overall control pattern. Thus, the various different tasks that members carry on lead to an institution takes overall social control of its members. When this has happened, we may say that the institutions have arrived or has become crystallized. Thus, institutions which are initially humanly created over, over time soon develop a socially objective reality of their own. Box 4.2, experience and interpretation. We cannot claim that this embeddedness is absolutely universal. The world is not always taken as ordinary by all people and all occasions. Buddhist mediators and other mystics have devised deliberate methods for withdrawing the mind's accent to the ordinary assumptions about reality and have claimed to experience an illumination by looking at whatever transpires without putting an interpretation upon it. It's also taken from Randall Collins, 1908, Theoretical Sociology, page number 279. Berger and Luckman pointed out that the relation between man and his social world is dialectical. That is, each phenomena acts, interacts, and reacts to other. Thus, man and nature cannot be separated, as each has an effect on the other, which can be beneficial or determinant. Thus, we can say that the social reality has three interrelated aspects. These are the facts that the society is produced by human beings. Further, it becomes clear that the society is an objective reality, and that as a consequence of these factors, man becomes a social product himself. Now, society requires to be accepted or realized, that is to say, it is indeed of legitimation, which is done by socializing the new generation of members into the pre-existing patterned way of interaction. Socialization, it may be pointed out, is done steadily and almost continuously during the growing years, and it never ends even unto death and attitudes towards the beyond. That is to say, institutions provide for rules of birth, life, and death, and how this process can be made more efficient. However, socialization is never only able to keep all members in the line of control, and as such there are some percentage of deviance in any society. The inner control or the control of attitudes is what makes the institution such a powerful force. However, social reality, shared experience, and common compliance led to an inner and outer coggling of experience, which settles down in the subconsciousness and exercise control, and this is what makes socialization firm, steady, and perpetual. It is through institutions like the family that we learn to become human beings and to exhibit a behavior that are social beneficial. However, again, there is no perfect correlation between legitimation, socialization, and overall behavior, and there are lapses in socialization which can sometimes lead to a tear in the social fabrics in the form of riots or other violent disturbances, just because the social control or institutions, how it is passed on, sometimes break down, and such a situation could be dangerous for social harmony. Apart from the above, we find that human beings have to enact a particular learned role behavior which is essential to the well-being of the fabric of society. Roles set up mutual obligation and reciprocal links. When these roles are repeated often enough, an elaborate role structure develops. This is so even if a role play is relatively simple, and much more so as the role has wider implications and much greater social control. Thus, a role defines the social self and the other way around. Roles have their origin in reciprocal typifications, just as do institutions. Roles create a social fabric that is linked both in time and space, and has further to conform the role limits, and thereby forming a very backbone of institutions and social life as a whole. This is to say, it is institutions that shapes the individuals and then start depending upon them. Therefore, to play a role properly, the player or the member must know the wholeness of the role and realizes it is in its many intricacies, including the cognitive and the behavioral aspect. This implies that there is a social distribution of knowledge in society uh, which occurs as the members play and enact their social roles, leading to a basic understanding of how a member is supposed to be respond to some other social person in interaction or reflections. It has been pointed out that the study of roles is very important in the sociology of knowledge, since that is what leads to us to learn about how the macroscopic institutions impact upon the individual and the group and create a real experience which are part of the construction of social reality. Thus, as we go although along, we find the construction of social reality is in fact as an elaborate and cooperative effort of all the members of society, and is not something that any one individual can undertake. If a society is relatively coherent and orderly, it will have institutions that are respected and shared by members of the society. On the other hand, if there is much conflict and disorder in the society, it is clear that the institutions within society are breaking up, or at least not being subscribed to any great measure. In other words, if there is a society that is highly blankized, its institutional base will also have a multiple synchronous societies or subculture. In fact, it is the existence of the subculture which indicate quite clearly that we cannot talk about reality in the singular, and it must be realized that reality is not the same throughout the society or a nation state. In fact, there are plural perceptions of society depending on the precise position that the member is located within his or her community. This is because knowledge is the product of interaction between its knowledge base and the social context. However, we need to point out here that there are much institutions which become so powerful that they indeed become refeed and take on an almost independent course of sometimes disturbing the given arrangements in the society in anomic situations where social order breaks down temporarily. 4.7 Legitimation and social reality. Let us now turn to another aspects of the social construction of reality, and this is the process of legitimation, which provides an institutions within society its overall rationale and rules of conduct. It provides the society with a set of rules and regulations which are taken to be the actual or true meaning of the purpose of ideology of an institution. By being legitimated, the institutions in society are able to provide guidelines of the work conditions that members of each institutions are supposed to follow, or face sanctions which could range from the nominal to the extreme forms of existing rules that apprehend conduct that is not the interest of the organizations. Reflections and action 4.2. Why does social institutions need legitimations? Reflect and comment. The legitimation provides a total rationale regarding what the actor or the actors are supposed to do, could do, and even want to do. In short, we cannot say that institutionalization is relatively successful unless all actions are legitimated by the ideology of the institutions, which is normally an extension of the overall national or global society. However, we need to keep in mind that the theoretical ideological axis that uphold most institutions is often a fragile one, and the indifferent or different behavior within an institutional context can make it break down and cease to exist effectively. At this point, we must indicate that another dimension of legitimation concerns the symbolic universe. This symbolic universe takes the social construction of reality to another level, which helps to make society cohere. The symbolic universe is a matrix of total meaning, both objective and subjective, and it is actually the apprehension of the symbolic universe is necessary to be able to be a member of the society and thereby living within the prescribed social order and be a member of any specific society. Thus, it is the symbolic universe which is a cognitive tool to apprehend to a member or even to a subvert the process of social construction, which, as we pointed out earlier, suffers from being in a fragile condition of and therefore has to be bolstered by various institutions modalities to give it continuity and to go on from generation to generation, all the while adapting and reordering itself to meet the challenge and a new generation which has grown up with different values. As such, no matter how legitimate an institution within society is, it definitely undergoes changes, and new legitimation links have to be brought into to explain new, even threatening situation. As such, the progress of legitimation may be spread out over time and time that may prove to be much greater than even the total life of any of its members. Thus, it is the symbolic universe which is of prime importance in the overall hierarchy of a human being can experience. Box 4.3 Mind and Society. The symbolic universe is what arranges a society in the mind of the members so that what is perceived through the senses, in fact, all the possible experience is filtered down through the cognitive process, both objective and subjective. It is thus the binding glue of society, and we have briefly indicated that it takes control of all the discrete bits of knowledge and social procedure and is able to combine and resolve it within the given framework of societal membership. As Berger and Luckman put it in that it makes sense of the entire universe. By this we mean the social and cultural states of being that exist in any culture have to be apprehended as a cognitive aspects of gaining membership. This is so because each group of members who have shared similar situations will be coerced into finding meaning in the world of everyday life, because it is in part of a projection of the desires, fears and expectations of other members within an institution or institutions in society. Thus, it becomes clear that the symbolic universe is a method for not only apprehending reality but creating it also, and thus what we are talking about is the fact that there is an intermesh between the subjective and the objective sides of reality, both of which are perceived by human beings who are members of any institutions or groups or institutions in any society. Thus, it is pointed out that placement within a symbolic order of symbolic universe is reality very important and the very basics of perception that will be available to any member of society. Thus, we can clearly see how members of any society are keenly engaged in the task of socially constructing a reality that is able to cope with an unforeseen situation. However, such total control is very difficult, and it is in every society we find that there are problems which cry for a situation. Further, it is also absolutely clear since the Durkheim that any socially constructed system leaks. There are always some people or group of people which see reality is as very different from the majority of the members. This is what often cause tears in the social fabrics of society, which no matter how much care the members have helped to construct or build it up. In short, human beings have not only to be apprehending illegitimate structures but maintaining their continuity. Indeed, there are some groups or institutions like family, polity, commerce and so on which also find similarities among them, but they are almost also quite distant and different in their construct, in the scope and spread in any group, no matter how large or small it is. 4.8 Socialization and Legitimation. Let us now turn to how the human mind uses various aspects to uphold the symbolic universe that is related to and is a part of social process. Thus, if an institution is to be a part of a member's existence, it has to be appropriately legitimated by being located or placed in some particular part of the symbolic universe. This is what gives it meanings and power to social reality. If the symbolic universe undergoes a shift over time, then new legitimating structures and discourses are invented by the human mind to bolster the social reality that have been disturbed or shaken and make it whole again. This happens in times of great stress, political, economic, social, but the symbolic universe remains, even though in a somewhat attuned form. Now further, if the symbolic universe is confronted with a pattern of socialization that is paradoxical or even contradictory to it, then a problem of lack of meaning arises and has to be dealt with the establishment of a new ideological framework or concept that can deal with the altered reality. When this happens, the societal forces and institutions begin to repress the groups who are perceived as threatening for the symbolic universe in an attempt to reiterate all that can be kept from the old symbolic order into the new, and thereby salvage something from the past or the social order which has readjusted itself to deal with the new situations in social process. Thus, we find that the construction of social reality is also dependent on precision of the concepts that are there to deal with it. If these concepts are traditional, they will usually require a new or modern interpretation. On the other hand, the concepts and attitudes that are retained will now be placed differently in the new ideology that has been both created and accepted by members of a society. Thus, this progress requires cognitive and normative bolstering or legitimation. We may say that then that mythology itself provides the conceptual apparatus for the symbolic universe, and this functions as an adaptive mechanism so far as the society is concerned. It has been pointed out that mythology itself was created to overcome paradoxes and inconsistencies in the overall environment. Bulger and Luckman pointed out to maintain the symbolic universe there are several types of conceptual equipment including mythology, theology, philosophy, and science. Now, while mythology is associated with the mass construction of social reality, we find that the other three elements mentioned become increasingly the domain of the specialists and the elites. Such a body of knowledge is quite different than what the specialities in theology, philosophy, and science are concerned with. That is to say that the relation between the lay person and the expert becomes very different from each other, as the latter are a specialized activity of social elites. We may ask at this point that what are the implication and supplication of the creation and maintenance of the symbolic universe? There in fact two features of the symbolic universe maintenance. These are therapy and inhalation. In the case of the therapeutics of symbolic universe maintained, what happens is that the attempt of the concept that form the symbolic universe are used to re-socialize members so that they can play their role in society. Yet it may be noted that the therapy itself does not claim or reclaim all the members. In such a case, the symbolic universe and its implications have not been properly understood, if they have been understood at all. In case of the concept of inhalation, we find that all the areas of meaning and existence that are not subsumed under the symbolic universe have to be erased or eliminated so that they do not start challenging the legitimacy of the system of the same. Thus, in both these approaches or applications, we find that the aim of exercise is to ensure integration and incorporation into society. If this is not done, the society will undergo economic disturbance and the social order will become dysfunctional. Thus, a truly representative symbolic universe is one that covers conceptually each and every aspect of reality and leaves nothing out whatsoever. It is obvious that such a system does not exist, and in practice, each member is basically approximating the concept of the symbolic universe. In doing this, the members of a society come to have many ideas in common, but there is still room for individualization of members. Social reality and 4.9 social reality and the symbolic universe. Now, what is the implication for social organization and the maintenance of the symbolic universe? We have already made the point that reality is socially defined, and that it is human being and human groups that defines its contours. Thus, we find that the specialities in a society provides complete legitimation of the social reality. Such experts usually hold very different views from the lay members of definition of reality. Thus, we may point out again that can be differences of view and opinion between the experts and laymen. There is thus a sort of competitions on whose definitions and concepts are going to be beneficial and become operative in social interaction. As we can see, there are different ways of apprehending and perceiving social process. Which way is seen as the best course of action depend on the ideology which is evoked and which concepts are used to explain any aspects of the symbolic universe that has become the area of concern. Example: societal conflict over the distribution of resources. Groups often subscribe to an ideology which will benefit them and evoke theories which will help them achieve their goals, social, economic, or political. Box 4.4 Pluralism and Reality. It may be noted that most modern societies are pluralistic, comprising many races, ethnicities, and religions. In such pluralistic societies, the room for conflict is much reduced and the outright conflict is rare. Pluralism itself arises in times of rapid change and erodes the strong foundations of traditions and make them form new structures and patterns of interactions, and new theories are invented to legitimate the new social structures in society. Such legitimations are necessary, as we have pointed out, because without them no new ideology can be formed, or if formed it cannot be successful in maintaining and propagating it. On the other hand, we find institutions themselves are changed or altered in some way to fit into the existing social reality, and there is thus a dialectic between institutions and social reality. Again, the definition of reality itself projects that the reality and these definitions have a self-fulfilling aspect to them and begin to change the contours of reality itself in social process. Thus, social change can only be understood as a dialectical process between the new theories and the legitimate new institutions. These institutions are also affected and themselves changed to have a close correlation between themselves and the theories and ideologies used to legitimate them. It may be added here that the social construction of reality is a human product and has been realized by the efforts of human beings alone, and it is experienced by them as a set of complete experience. Thus, sociology of knowledge maintains that the existence of the symbolic universe is reflected in the lives of the members of the society. As a corollary to this, we may add that the existence of a symbolic universe has its base in individuals and has no existence apart from their lives. In short, although we are saying that man produces the reality within which he then lives, procreates, and expires, he is not quite capable of altering it alone and requires a group or community to do the same. Let us now turn to the description of society in relation to subjective reality. We shall first dwell on primary and secondary socialization as ways in which human beings create their own reality. Thus, society exists both as a objective and subjective reality. To understand this fully, we need to appreciate that society is an ongoing process which comprises the elements of externalization, objectification, and internalization. As the human externalities social reality, it acts back upon him and he internalizes it. This means that the existence of social situation has been apprehended and subscribed to in such a great measure that certain actions and interactions become most mechanical and their existence is never called into question. Thus, there is a time sequence involved in the imparting of certain basic and essential points of social reference, which means it takes time to become a fully fledged member of any society. Being a fully fledged member of a society being that the member has to acquire membership and is able to make decisions, interpretations, and even plan and pursue objective or a goal over time. Thus, as Berger and Luckman put it, that the individual becomes a member through a temporal sequence, and as the social reality is apprehended more and more, the members of a society are able to predict the outcome of certain actions and interaction. This is to say that, say, as social reality is apprehended more and more, the human being is able to be an aware member of society, being able to realize and live up to his expectation within limits set by society itself. It may thus be pointed out that the primary socialization comprises the understanding of role of the personal others and the generalized other. In short, such socialization proceeds for the inner circle of or closer circle of a human being to wider and wider circles until it encompasses the whole of society. Now, this does not happen in a majority of cases, and primary socialization in some cases does fail to bring about the desired uniformity within the society. This type of deviance within the society, however, is not a matter of alarm but of serious concern. Thus, when the gestalt of the generalization lies the other has been learned, we find that both the objective and the subjective sides of social reality balance, and successful primary socialization has been completed. Secondary socialization, in fact, is a necessary aspect of the division of labor and how knowledge has been distributed within the society. At this point, we find that the institutional subverts have been internalized and role specific knowledge has been generated concerning the social activity and output that any role required. The secondary socialization adds new layers of data and knowledge, which is some cases even supersedes some aspects of primary socialization. However, to establish overall consistency, we find that secondary socialization pursues conceptual clarity to bring together different bodies of social knowledge under a single umbrella. We may not point out that here that while in primary socialization of the member or group that is acting upon human being is relatively small. In case of secondary classification socialization, that people who act and influence one's mentally and behaviors are very many numerically speaking. One has entered the ocean from the pond, and in the secondary socialization one is in the mindset of society at large. There is inevitably a formality and lack of personal depth in the second socialization, which is there because of the complex division of labor, which in itself demands that the institutional reality is not distributed too much, and there are institutions like marriage which have been there in human society since time immemorial and continue to be with us. As can be readily seen, both primary and secondary socialization are delicate procedures and have to be carefully imparted and acquired. Thus, socialization is a process that occurs as part of every human society, but to maintain the objective and subjective structures does not always happen. There is a certain level of deviancy in every community. To contain this deviancy, society has to develop some control procedures to protect their disruption and eventual disintegration. Thus, reality maintenance procedures such as mass media or mass contract programs become part of the overall attempt to perpetuate social reality and to make human perception of it be integrated and coherent. In this regard, it can be pointed out that usually it is primary socialization which has a greater durability and is much more strongly ingrained than the procedures of secondary socialization. Whole layers of loss of meaning often do not stand out to scrutiny and start breaking apart. Well established rules of conduct may be challenged, and new sets of rules may take their place or at least affect some parts of their existence. Thus, secondary socialization is more artificial by nature and is less socially deeply lodged in the human than the primary socialization. As we shall now discuss, it is casual conversation which is what is responsible for the continuation of both the objective and the subjective state of reality. Thus, we now turn to a description of the role language plays in reality maintenance. 4.10, maintaining reality and language. It may be pointed out here that the language that a society uses is a strong foundation and process for the maintenance and perpetuation of socially constructed reality. In language, society finds an institution, so to speak, and maintains social reality through its incessant use both in formal and informal settings. In fact, there are prominent theories which indicate that language itself may be at the base of reality and helps greatly in constructing it. It needs to be indicated just as language is a social fact, and the reality and conceptualization of social reality is an aspect of going social reality. Box 4.5, paradigm of social reality. Languages need to be modified over time, and this itself indicates that social reality is malleable to a certain state and undergoes changes, especially in the dominant ideology as a whole of the society under consideration. This is itself implies that over a period of time, new paradigms of social reality emerge and pose it their own challenges to the members of society. Such new paradigms of social reality, however, take time to settle down into the consciousness of the members, and we can have two or more paradigms working at the same time in the society. Thus, as we pointed out earlier, there is in fact a multiple social reality rather than one single social reaching model of society. Rather than one single overarching model of society. It is then obvious that such a complicated and delicate maneuver as constructing reality is an ongoing process and can be subverted only to an extent by rival groups in the society or community who give different version and different choices to the members in terms of life options and work options, so that the relationship is dialectical. Thus, if language structures and usages help construct reality, it is also clear that life experience and life situations also feed back into language structures, effectively modifying them and influencing their overall content. It needs to be kept in mind that language is indispensable in creating compatible consensual social constructions, and that it is what connects people. We need to mention here briefly that when we consider language, and we are entering into the realm of vast system of symbols, gestures, hints, clues, and even more perceptions, and the field of semiotic and kinesthetics, all of which are an aspect of societal process and are central to human communication. Thus, the role of language in the construction of reality cannot be undermined or minimized. In fact, without effective communication, sharing of information, ideas, and knowledge, There is no culture in a society. Language in its widest sense is a tool par excellence in the hands of society, and with its help both the subjective and objective aspects of social constructed reality come together and cohere. It can also provide alternative models and for reality constructions, and in plural societies different communities or groups do have the capacity to raise appropriate models of reality, which then act back on that community, creating a two-way bridge for communication. 4.11 conclusion. The whole question then is that of the internalization of the social reality, both objective and subjective, and this happens as a dialectic between man and his social structure. In fact, the entire idea is to strike a balance between nature and the culture, and if the persistence of the social reality is not to be disrupted. Thus successful socialization is that in which there is a high degree of consonance of or adjustment between the outer and inner realities, so that the human is an active participator in social process rather than being simply at the mercy of societal procedures and rules. At this point we reach a caveat, and this is the fact that after socialization is not more effective. This happens when the phenomena of individualism takes root in a society and creates humans who do not subscribe wholly to the social order and social reality. In such instances, we find that there are various socially available procedures to bring the deviance from the overall ideologically back to the common fold. Such is the role of counselors, psychiatrists, shamans, saints, and others. We may ask at this point why socialization does not work in many cases. One reason could be the fact that the concerned human child is being subjected to two different discourses on the social reality. Thus, if husband and the wife are not consonant in their behavior, the child or the children which are now unable to adopt into any existing discourses or reality and may have two or more systems in their consciousness. Such instances may often turn so serious, and the deviance is so disruptive or social process that such members may have to be isolated in a hospital to help them to get over their conflict and confusion regarding the apprehension of one single reality, usually backed by the dominant version of reality. This is a fascinating area of research, and we find that problems of internalization of social structure by members is become increasingly difficult in modern and postmodern worlds where the stress of individuality is very great. Individualistic implies putting one's own perspective in the place of the given perspective of social reality. This usually causes a rupture in the socially accepted definition of reality, where all the members are supposed to be integrated and cohere and cooperative with each other. Instead of in present day global society, what is valued above all is creative integrity, and this implies evolving some basic model of paradigm which is not really subscribing to the total paradigm but to a very specific and important part of it. This implies that we can study the social construction of reality in different ways, and modern man in realizing increasingly that individual or community interpretations of social reality and social order are not to be rectified. Expect in extreme situations where it is not a dissonance with society but a breakdown of the entire edifice of social reality. However, as all plural societies indicate plural versions, and reality will dominate so long as the social structure is capable of taking the strain. In fact, nowadays the move is always from monolithic models of societal explanations to micro models of social behavior. Further reading 4.1 to give you further reading Berger, Peter and Thomas Luckman 1967 The Social Construction of Reality, and Gary Finkel Harold 1967 Studies in Ethnomethodology, and Goffman and Gray 1959 The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, and Alfred Schultz The Phenomenology of Social World. So this is the end of the session, the unit 4. Okay.